that right now in the world we've never seen before. We've never seen this amount of change recorded in human history ever before. Really, mental health is anything that negatively affects our emotional, our physical, and our social well-being. And really, it's characterized by having, sometimes like increased amount of stress on a daily and a long-term basis, and feeling, those feelings of worthiness, unworthiness, hopelessness, fatigued, having anxiety, and just overall feeling, no hope for the future. These are key indicators that perhaps somebody's suffering with their mental health. I think in a lot of places, especially like Pakistan, there's this kind of stigma that's weaved into the culture, and I wouldn't even say religion, so to say, but it's really weaved into the culture, like many other places in the world, where if you're seen or if you speak about your mental health, or maybe perhaps you're struggling, there's this kind of stigma that perhaps, you're not doing well spiritually. So one of the biggest things that the youth are really struggling with is anxiety, number one. It's something that I'm actually not 100% sure if official name has been given to it, but I am going to speak about it. And that's this constant comparing against others and what others have, what others doing. And we're really seeing this because of the spike in social media. A lot of the time mental health suffers because we either worry too much in the future or worry too much about the past, so we're robbed of the present. In the professional role, usually, and the most common thing that we see is mental health really starts to plummet when an individual has been given, an unmanageable workload, or there's, breakdown in communications or relationships with perhaps their seniors. This concept of resilience is essentially, in its most simplest way to explain, it's being able to face challenge and complexities, and not allowing those challenges and complexities to completely, some way, like knock you down. You're able to get back up and you're able to move from them and transition through them. That essentially is what resilience is about. I think that in Pakistan there's a notion of really attaching, like the nation has an attachment to the future, hope for the future, and that is one of the strongest things. Like they say, there's two really strong things that you can give to a society and country. So they can either have fear, it's really going to move them, or they can have hope, that is really going to move them. If you're struggling with mental health, and the first piece of advice I would say is, if you feel that there is somebody that you can speak to, please speak to them. Somebody who's supportive. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody you know. Sometimes this could be somebody in your community, a spiritual leader, somebody at your work, and please reach out and get that support.
Hello, Yasmina. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Kazar. How are you doing? Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much for your time. I was just doing recently a little bit of research, and I read this statement. Pakistan faces a significant mental health crisis with an estimated 24 million people requiring mental health care. Despite this high demand, there are only 0.19 psychiatrists per 100,000 people. So in my language, 1 लाख लोगों के लिए 0.19 psychiatrists available hai in the country, which indicates a severe shortage of mental health professionals and facilities. Socioeconomic challenges such as poverty, unemployment, and financial instability significantly impact mental health in Pakistan. These stressors can lead to anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders. So that's why I thought to invite you, because this area is one of your specialty. You speak about mental health. You are very passionate about resilience as well. So I thought to have a little bit discussion with you on this topic. So thank you again for your time. Let's start with a little bit of your personal story. Who is Yasmina, and what led her journey into the field of mental health and resilience?
Yeah, sure. So, thank you for having me here today. And really, professionally, I'm a corporate trainer, and I do work one to one with clients as well. And it's really aimed at giving individuals and also workplaces, those tools and strategies to really increase their mental well-being and increase their resilience to handle everyday challenges and everyday stresses of life. And really, what led to this career path is quite unusual. It was first stemmed with in university. So I studied psychology in university. And then when I left university, like a lot of people, sometimes you don't know what you're going to do or, what path you're going to go down. And I had an opportunity to become a graduate researcher. And what that meant is that I was involved in a project which looked into, high performing teams emotionally and also in terms of their work. So it tapped on the well-being and in the well-being space. And it was specifically tech teams at that time, so cybersecurity professionals. And then we created like a manual script that recommended for best recommendations of well-being and workplace and individual best practices to be a high performing individual and to have resilience and increase or maintain our mental health, so to say. But really the reason why this work really kind of lit me up in some way, if you want to describe it like that, is because I actually at a very young age I left school. So I was 14 years old, I left school, and then at a very young age I also left home. And I never really understood how I was able to come back from that. Somehow I had just navigated my way back onto the path, back into education, and really, like I said, going back to university and then becoming a graduate researcher in the beginning. So it really, within me, I was very curious to, okay, so what are the tools? Like, what exactly did I do and so many other people do? And how can we also help other people tap into that for themselves?
Thank you, Yasmina. My next question is, what is mental health, and what could be some common signs of a poor mental health?
Yes, certainly. So really, mental health is anything that negatively affects our emotional, our physical, and our social well-being. And really it's characterized by having sometimes like increased amount of stress on a daily and a long-term basis, and feeling, those feelings of worthiness, unworthiness, hopelessness, fatigued, having anxiety, and just overall feeling, no hope for the future. These are key indicators that perhaps somebody's suffering with their mental health.
What are some of the major changes in the world that are affecting our mental health?
Yeah, so this is actually a really good question, Khazar, because I think that there's not enough there's not enough spoken about this at this precise time, and there needs to be more awareness about this. And what that exactly is that right now in the world we've never seen before. We've never seen this amount of change recorded in human history ever before. And the change goes against, or it expands against, climate change. We also have economic change. We also have conflict, and then we also have technology. So climate change is, unusual weather patterns like in our spring, summer, and winter that we're used to seeing. And then economic change is just like seeing such a spike in inflation, prices going up from everyday things that were completely different, usually pre-COVID. That's where we're really seeing it. And then technology. So, of course, with the rise of AI and just all of these technological changes that we are seeing as well. And then I think social media ties into that also. And then we all, finally have conflict. And conflict is one that is really affecting a lot of people, and rightfully so. So we've never seen so much conflict happen in terms of what's happening in Africa, in places like Sudan, in places like the Palestine, and also in Ukraine and Russia. And what happens is that people are touched on all of these different bases every single day, and they don't know it. They don't know that this amount of change is basically compressing on them at one time. Like I said, never before in human history has this been recorded to happen all at once. And it just takes a few little things to trigger them, really. And that could just be seeing, some upsetting news about what's happening, in a war that's happening, or, just constantly being bombarded by inflation prices. So it's really important to prioritize mental health at the moment, to prioritize, our well-being, and also to prioritize, really trying to exert some and build some resilience.
Thank you, Yasmina. How does mental health stigma affect people in countries like Pakistan, and how do cultural and religious beliefs contribute to this stigma?
Yeah, so that's another really good question, because I think in a lot of places, especially like Pakistan, there's this kind of stigma that's weaved into the culture. And I wouldn't even say religion, so to say, but it's really weaved into the culture, like many other places in the world, where if you're seen or if you speak about your mental health, or maybe perhaps you're struggling, there's this kind of stigma that perhaps, you're not doing well spiritually, or maybe if you just increase your like religious efforts or things like that, or within your spirituality, then maybe you won't have depression. So it's almost like those individuals suffering with their mental health, now it causes a situation where they feel that they're judged if they speak out on it, especially from a religious standpoint, which is sometimes one of the heaviest judgments to take on ourselves, so to say, because just of that kind of the guilt feeling that is being made to kind of feel and experience. So I think at this point, especially with the stigma in countries like Pakistan, we need to incorporate a lot more education, because just because somebody is suffering with their mental health, it doesn't mean that, they're not fulfilling their religious duties, or they've abandoned, their religion, so to say. It just may mean that they need support. Sometimes also people can go through traumatic events and their brain needs to, process it, or they've experienced some trauma within their body, and it actually has nothing to do with their spirituality and their religion. So I think a bit more education just needs to be, really rolled out in this area.
Yasmina, we are both parents. What kind of mental health issues are most common among our youth these days, and how can we combat these challenges?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important question, and this is a really important topic. Like you said, we're both parents. So one of the biggest things that that the youth are really struggling with is anxiety. Number one, it's something that I'm actually not 100% sure if official name has been given to it, but I am going to speak about it. And that's this constant comparing against others and what others have, what others doing. And we're really seeing this because of the spike in social media. And essentially what this does is, especially the youth, right? And this even extends to adults, but really, it really impacts the youth quite heavily, where they spend so much time on social media, and in their minds, as they're scrolling, they're comparing, right? And this just robs individuals of, that joy that they have with the things that they have, that the things that they can feel gratitude for, and it constantly keeps them in a I must have more, or I don't have that, or I need to be there. And it's really quite crippling sometimes. So I think one of the biggest things, if your children are still young enough, or even if you have older children in their teens, really limit their screen time. and their access to social media. Like, I think this really needs to be actioned now, and as a protective measure, and also introduce back like just some of that connectiveness with one another, with family members, and just that human interaction, and like bringing them and also us back to the present moment.
How do mental health issues impact professional life, especially in high pressure environments? I still remember when we used to work from home during COVID time, and even at work, we used to focus a lot, do trainings and all. How do you see overall situation now? And how does it impact if you would help us to understand it?
Yeah, so in the professional role, usually, and the most common thing that we see is mental health really starts to plummet when an individual has been given, an unmanageable workload, or there's, breakdown in communications or relationships with perhaps their seniors. So their values are compromised, so to say, and it's just an unhealthy environment. But really, the signs of this, and I would say there's different things for different pockets, but we really need to ensure that we are having, number one, a healthy work-life balance. And I know sometimes that can be challenging, especially like you said, Fizar, in high-performing roles. But sometimes, we have to take care of ourselves in order to keep performing. And a lot of the times we can say, and I've been there before, oh, do you know what? I can just sacrifice that sleep. Or, oh, I can do a few more hours. Or, oh, do you know what? I actually don't really need to maybe wind down tonight and maybe have like a movie or go out with my friends, or, reconnect with my peers, right? Or connect with my peers. We can kind of put those things off and prioritize our work. But actually, we need to recognize those things as activities and things that are actually refilling our cup so we can perform our best. And I don't think the conversation has really been framed like that until recently. There has been very much, this hustle culture, just do as much as you can, the hardest person wins and things like that. But actually we need to recognize that we need to fill ourselves up to some capacity to be able to perform and add value, because that's what it's about. And sometimes also it's very beneficial to pause. And I've found this in my working career as well, because I've fallen into that category of, just working really hard. But you can actually be so much more efficient to pause and take your mind away from your work, because what you'll find is that you'll find new ideas, or you'll think about things new way, or you'll find new ways of seeing things, or you'll problem solve, and then that makes you more efficient, if you understand what I mean, because you give your brain that breathing space. And I think that is really is vital.
I was reading an article where WHO, World Health Organization, now characterizes as a threat to humanity the isolation. So what is this isolation, and what are some practical ways to deal with feelings of isolation?
Yeah, so this is actually a really big thing at the moment, and I think I also read the article when I first heard about it from WHO, so World Health Organization. But what I've also found is that even in my personal life and my interactions with other people, I'm picking it up within people that I actually know, whether they're acquaintances or whether they're even individuals that are quite close to me. More and more and increasingly, people are starting to feel more isolated, and this really has shot up in terms of remote working. So even though there's a lot of good research and statistics about remote working, but I do seem to question whether, ever since we've come out of COVID, has our remote and hybrid ways of working contributed to this sense of isolation. And again, bringing it back to what you said earlier about having children, sometimes even me as a parent, it's very hard for me to feel isolated because I have children. Sometimes I don't even get a minute to myself. But I now realize, and we have to have that empathy for others, that is not everybody's situation. And there's many people who are by themselves, maybe without children or without, a husband or wife and things like that. But essentially what the World Health Organization, so the WHO, have identified, and the way they've classified this, like the seriousness of isolation, is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day to our health, like this feeling of isolation. They've categorized the danger of this isolation to the same danger that nuclear wars or a war would present to us, which is actually very serious when you put it in a context like that. And really, to try and solve this problem, it's not, I don't think it's one size fits all, but generically, again, we need to prioritize and not undermine this need for connection with others in real life. So not just on screen, on social media and things like that, but actually real life connections. And also, I think there's another thing that I've picked up on, and we live very much in a fast-paced society where everything is at our fingers, at a click of the finger. Food, movies, anything you really want now. Everything has been so, you can just get it like that. And I think we need to perhaps move back to a bit more of a slower paced life, so to say, because I think that creates a barrier to individuals, making friends, to individuals finding, a partner or a husband and wife, because everybody kind of expects everything instantly now. So we need to, just move back to a bit more a slower pace of life and increase our connections with one another, and not undermine that. Sorry, that was a very long answer to a short question.
No, I love long answers. So I'm from Pakistan, so I was just thinking that maybe being isolated won't be possible in our culture. It's quite family oriented culture. But if I look at our children these days, I feel most of them are quite isolated. They are sitting in the corner of the room somewhere playing games on iPad, iPhone, and I think this isolation can be a big issue for our children.
Absolutely. I think as a parent myself, so I have a 6-year-old and a 11-year-old, both daughters, and I think as well, being a working parent, sometimes, it's just a bit easier. And no matter the age of your children, even if they're 15, 16, or 2 or 3 or 5, it can sometimes be a bit easier to say, do you know what, if you want to watch a TV, great, because then you just get to kind of have a bit of chill time and things like that. But I think, again, we need to now prioritize, because the WHO, like I said before, the risk and the way they are classifying this thing of isolation is actually very, very serious. If we think about nuclear wars, if we think about smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So I think we need to, have, even when we do feel tired and stuff, right? We need to just, put the effort in to take them out, take them to parks, to really socialize them. And even if they don't feel like doing it, like so many times my children, they don't want to go rollerblading, but they have no choice. Get them on, we're going now. And then by the time they get there, they love it. And, we could just go down so many rabbit holes with this, but even for their physical enhancement, right? When we think about them looking at a screen, so children, when they look at a screen, compared to when you look out just anywhere outside, the sky, the clouds, the buildings, nature, or anything, scientists are actually finding now that if we continue to really expose our children to screens and things that are not of the outside world, as we are now, their ability to see, like, the depth of their sight will decrease in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And over generations, like, this can get quite serious, like over generations, our eyes just won't be as strong, because we've robbed them of the depth of the outside world. So it's just, and I know not everybody has access to this type of research and this information, but even how we progress as humans it's really vital.
Now I understand why WHO highlights it as a threat to humanity. I also have an example at home that my elder son, normally he's studying, he's sitting in a study room in his bedroom, and he doesn't come and meet and greet as many times as the younger one will do. So over the time, I observed that the elder who's busy, who's a little bit kind of, he likes to sit and work alone. He's a less social than the other one. So this is quite obvious from the behavior. Even when we go out sometime, he would say, okay, I'm just staying, you guys can bring food or whatever for me as well. So I can feel that, and we should really think about it and take care of this isolation thing. So any tips if you want to give to the parents about this? How can we bring them closer to us?
Yeah. So I think so some things that I've incorporated so within our household and what I've seen work for other parents as well is number one, limit their screen time. I think that's the main one. And sometimes it can be hard to put in boundaries whilst there hasn't been boundaries for a long time. And I've definitely been a part of that group. But limiting their screen time. So maybe, for instance, sometimes, some of our children do need to use screens for their work and their schoolwork and things like that. That's separate, but other screen time. So maybe that could be a day, like you get this on a day, or maybe it could be an hour a day or things like that. And then other things is just really, getting them out and not giving them the option in it. Because like I said before, sometimes, before they go out, they don't want to. And I think we can all relate to that. Sometimes we don't want to go maybe to the gym or go out or go for a walk. But once we actually do it, we actually enjoy it. So I think it's taking the options away and taking back our just our autonomy as a parent, so to say. Not autonomy, like our kind of I'm trying to look for the word, not strength, but that empowerment. There you go, as a parent, and just saying like, no, you have to come and do this X, Y, and Z. And even if they don't understand it, we understand it, that this is vital for their greater good. And then also just finding things that they enjoy. And this is something that I've incorporated as, okay, well, what hobbies do you like? At first, my 11-year-old daughter, she's like, oh, I don't know. I don't like hobbies. And then at one day, I gave her an ultimatum. I said, well, we're going to have to find a hobby for you because summer break is coming up and you're not going to be inside on screens and things like that. So just trial different things out. And now she's discovered that she loves rollerblading. So it's connecting them with a hobby and sometimes just, investing in that hobby for them. Sports is a great thing, is a really great thing. And yeah, those are really my tips. So limit screen time, connect them with a hobby. If you can do sports, that's great, because sports also gives them that social connection. And take our empowerment back, so to say, and take the take the option out of things. And they have to come food shopping. They have to do these things. It's something we grew up and done, and it didn't hurt us. And in fact, sometimes we can look back on our memories as children and think, oh, I used to love it when I went with my mom or my dad to do this thing. And I think it's very, it grows you as a person, these different types of experiences.
As you know, I'm an HR person. What I can do and what my organization can do to help our people to have a better mental health, and if they have any mental health challenges, how can we help them?
Yeah, so I think there's three things. There's many things. I want to touch on three main important things that I think I've seen work well. So number one, leadership and support is really, like, the research that is coming out about this is just really staggering now. So just having, that psychological safety there, that people are able to be vulnerable with you, to open up, maybe if they're struggling with something, a part of their work, maybe even as a part of their personal life, spilling into their personal life, and just in general supporting them and being a pillar of support for them, so they feel that they can come and talk to you. And in the beginning, sometimes that can look like asking a bit more deeper questions than usual, right? So usual it's just, how are you? How was your weekend? But maybe once or twice just asking, so like, what do you do? Do you have family here? Especially being in the UAE where there's so many expats. But this can relate to all over the world, and just asking, those more I'm interested in you questions. And then that kind of opens up those communication barriers that person can feel comfortable in talking to you about, maybe something they're finding challenging with their mental health. And then we have another of managing workloads. I know this is easier said than done. And sometimes I hear this advice and I'm like, well, you know what? Sometimes day-to-day life, maybe running a business, in a company, running a business, sorry, because I run a business, so my mind went there. But in a company, in a corporation, sometimes there's a deadline. Sometimes something's gone wrong and we need to correct it. And sometimes there can be a lot of workload, right? But outside of those times, if we can manage them, if we can manage the workload that we give to people, again, that ties into them feeling supported and them feeling validated and heard. And I think that's a really important one. And again, that's something that goes such a long way. And that is it's just feeling seen. Sometimes if you can like express to somebody that, you appreciate their efforts, thank you very much. And, we couldn't do without you, or maybe not in those words, but you make them feel like that. You make them feel really valued. Then you'll be surprised that person may want to, go the extra mile a bit more than usual. They may want to, exert even extra effort, because now they feel more connected and more of a team and kind of community within their workplace. So that's one and two tied together, sorry. And then the third thing I've seen played out really well in corporations is something I've seen a few companies introduce, and their community service days. And I think it's absolutely fabulous, because what that does is sometimes it could be different amounts for different companies, but sometimes it could just be like one community service day a quarter. And again, not going too much into detail, but on a neuroscience level, when we are able to give back to people, when we're able to help one another, when we're able to zoom out of our own lives and put ourselves in the shoes of other, or, see a perspective of somebody who's perhaps less fortunate than us, then that really gives us a perspective on life and really helps with our mental health. And just that giving, I'm sure everybody can really relate to this. Like, it feels good to give. And if you're in a company or a corporation where you can provide that, then I think that's fantastic. And like I said, I've seen it played out a few times in a few companies. I think it's great.
I hear this word a lot, resilience. So many times we hear this word when there is a national crisis, there is a war, there are climate emergencies, and even I invest in stock market. So when stock market is crashed for some time, we use this word resilience a lot. People are very resilient. This country is quite resilient. This market is very resilient. And also, I would say that human beings are very resilient. So, what is this resilience? What is the concept of resilience? And why do you think we need to be more resilient than ever before?
Yeah, so this concept of resilience is essentially, in its most simplest way to explain, it's being able to face challenge and complexities, and not allowing those challenges and complexities to completely, some way, like, knock you down. You're able to get back up and you're able to move from them and transition through them. That essentially is what resilience is about. Why do I think that is such, well, like you said anyway, Kizar, I think that is a innate human characteristic, actually. It's something we're not born with, but by accident, sometimes people pull on this resiliency, right? And it's something that can definitely be taught. Now, within my work and my research, I've now identified, strategies and best practices of, most resilient people, individuals, teams. So there is a science, and there is a science to it, so to say, and it can be taught even more efficiently than just uncovering it yourself throughout your life. And we've spoke about this before, but there's 4 practices of most resilient people in all areas of the world, right? And there are 4 practices. So number 1 is connectivity. So that's having that connectivity with ourselves, right? So really listening to our intuition, understanding our values, understanding when it's time for rest, when it's time for go, having connectedness with our peers around us, again, and our family and our community. The second one is vulnerability. This is one that I struggled with. Like, when I thought vulnerability, like, how can vulnerability be a part of resilience? But then it all made sense, because the more, well, not the more, but the willingness to show some vulnerability when it's appropriate. It's not appropriate, but it's an element of vulnerability, because sometimes I think that when I describe this, some people get it confused and say, oh, well, that can easily turn to like victimhood and always needing help. It's not that. It's just really being open with maybe things that you're struggling with. And when you're able to do that, you're able to get more support, right? People know what's going on for you. And then what happens as a result of that? You're able to be more resilient. And then the third is something called the Stockdale paradox. I won't go into detail about where this originated from, but what I would say is that the Stockdale paradox is essentially when we are able to be very optimistic for the future, however, level and balance that with the brutal facts of today and make a plan for it. So it's not having, that kind of optimism and just being completely blind to what's going on. It's saying, no, I'm going to, and the way I'd like to actually teach this is, and this is a really good practice for anybody, who you could be struggling with something right now, is just get out a piece of paper and pen. What you do, you make a line down the middle, right? And you have your optimist strategy. So you just put O on the right side or left side, and then you put your brutal facts strategy, right? And then you put the best case scenario. Where could this struggle that you're going through, how could this be resolved? What is the most positive outcome, and what are you striving for? And then on the other side, you want to put, okay, worst case scenario. If this happens, what am I going to do? And it's making a plan for that. And now, once you do that, what you've done is you've just provided your nervous system and yourself with security. That's it. Security and plan B. You've calmed yourself down. You know what, you're equipped of what you could do if something bad happens. And then now you've got a really hopeful future to attach yourself to, so you don't get like completely consumed by the bad that could happen, so to say. And a lot of the time mental health suffers because we either worry too much in the future or worry too much about the past. So we're robbed of the present. So that's exactly what it is. So once you do this strategy, you literally have both sides sorted. So now you can focus on the present and you're equipped.
Yasmina, can you a little bit explain what is being a little bit vulnerable? What is it? As we were discussing the other day, I'm always open. I share information. Many times my family thinks that sharing that kind of information may make me a bit vulnerable. I was having a conversation at work, and one of my colleague was saying that if we are a bit vulnerable, if people know that I'm a vulnerable, or if I share something which makes me a little bit vulnerable, people may misuse it, they may abuse it or take advantage of my vulnerability. So can you a little bit describe this? What kind of vulnerability you are talking about? And then is there any thin line, to be careful not to talk about those, and it's okay to talk about a couple of things? So if you can help me to understand a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I think okay, so I think in different environments, vulnerability will look different in different environments, so to say, right? So vulnerability maybe around your spouse or your family may look different professionally in a professional environment. I think your vulnerability is essentially when you are able to match your inside self feelings and thoughts with your outside self, so you can display like the most amount of authenticity as possible. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of people, a lot of the time, they get caught into powering these two different masks of being two different people, maybe perhaps at work, maybe perhaps at home. And this can really drain us. So, really, our vulnerability, like maybe in the workplace, is maybe not going into like too much detail about your personal life. Like, we don't want to share too much to where people maybe can use it against us in terms of, talking about maybe if we've had an upset with our spouse, or maybe if we've had an upset elsewhere in our lives, right? And then in our homes, I think you can display much more vulnerability there, because there's more of an unconditional, hopefully there's more of an unconditional relationship with your loved ones. But back to your question about some people saying that maybe you could be too vulnerable. By the way, Kazar, I don't like, from what I've heard, what I've know from you so far, you seem like a very warm and open person, and I think there's a strength to being an open person to a certain extent, because a lot of the time people don't tell you what's going on, and people don't show what type of individual they really are. And this now creates a disconnect, right? Because if you think about it from the other side, is it creates a disconnect between reality. So in terms of, somebody could be going through something secretly, and if they never come across another individual who expresses that, do you know what, this is just a simple example. Do you know what? Traffic in the morning makes me absolutely go berserk. And I have it triggers my anger and things like that. And maybe I never had, or I used to have anger issues. I've tried to work through them, but the traffic triggers me. In that moment, that person who's listening may think, oh, deep down, oh, I've actually suffered with anger issues before, or oh, I'm suffering with anger issues or anger management. But they would have never spoken about it, or they would have felt very isolated in that challenge they're having in their personal life, because nobody ever talks about their challenges, and everybody just wants to talk about the highlight reel, which means all the good stuff. So I think if you can get the balance right, I think it's very powerful to be open and vulnerable, because you give permission to other people to be vulnerable and their authentic selves as well.
The majority of my viewers are from investing background also. um, and I see that a lot of people, they don't share their personal information, such as, if I had a loss in the market, I had invested some money and I got some losses, huge losses. A lot of people don't even say, even when they make profits, they don't say anything to others. So what I understood from you is that if I incurred some losses, I didn't do some good investments, I lost money, it's okay to talk about it. Because I was just talking to my one of my friends, and I noticed that he had realized some losses. So it made me a lot of sympathetic to him. I thought, how can I help him? So we little bit connected more. So this is how I understood from this. Okay. And I'm also from Pakistan. So our country, our nation has always been going through troubles, one after another trouble. And a lot of time I read that Pakistanis are very resilient. You are a research scientist. So, what some of the effective resilient strategies have you observed among Pakistanis, and also other countries? Just share some effective strategies how to be resilient, and how these cultural or family systems and community systems in our countries play a role in being more resilient.
Yeah, sure. Just very quickly, just before answer that question, Khazar, if you don't mind me answering, because I think that I could provide value to what you just said earlier about sharing your, profits or losses and things like that, especially with investment. Especially, okay, if this is done on a individual level, like just friends or acquaintances sharing, of course, there's lessons to be learned there. And I think that's the biggest thing is when we're able to be vulnerable, be able to learn, you're able to get more information. And I spoke about this before. We really underestimate this. Only when we can open up about certain things, we're able to get more information. If you act like everything is perfect, you don't get the information. And it's exactly that. And then also from a if you have a few individuals, or if there's a lot of individuals who actually talk about this online, right, within their personal brand or within their channels and things like that. So my background is through my career. If I've on quite a few channels now, I've built my audience to quite a lot, so to say. And really that has always come, and now I can actually see the trends of best practices of building an audience and building a community. And I kid you not, my posts, right, whether it's video or written, where I talk about things that I'm struggling with, where I talk about my vulnerabilities, where again professionally I'm not going to go and talk about what happened between me and my spouse, so to say. It's the things that get the most engagement, build that community, DMs and things like that, and you end up learning from one another, and that is where relationships and value is added and built. So just really wanted to highlight that, because it's not something that you should shy away from. In fact, it's something you should do. So yeah, back to your question about building resilience strategies. Okay, so in Pakistan, like the amount of resilience that is displayed in Pakistan, especially with the COVID laws and things like that over the years, is I think that in Pakistan there's a notion of really attaching, like the nation has a attachment to the future, hope for the future. And that is one of the strongest things. Like they say there's two really strong things that you can give to a society and country. So they can either have fear that's really going to move them, or they can have hope that is really going to move them. And I think in Pakistan, that is the undercurrent that really builds and is the foundation for the resistance that we've seen all across the years and up until now. And in terms of everyday strategies, so in terms of like communities, I think it's a strength to keep, our cultural, that alignment, our family connections, our community connections, because this connectiveness really does build and maintain our resilience on not just a mental level, but also on a physical, right? It's just everything: spiritual, physical, and mental, and of course social. But in terms of like everyday strategies, there was one strategy that I spoke about the other day, and I will talk about. But the old things never go old. The old things that used to work many years ago are the things that still work today. And some of them is things like prayer. So attaching yourself to something that is, higher than yourself, to where, if you're feeling like you have a challenge, or, something's really upsetting you or stressing you out, you can just at times like hand it over and just say, you know what, I'm going to hand it over to a higher power than myself, and just relieve for that moment, right? Until you can start strategizing. And also things like physical health. So we know that exercising, and again, like these are things that we've been doing for years and years, but exercising really builds that mental resilience, that physical resilience within us. And actually there's a key to exercising for resilience, and I'm going to share it with you. And that is, like, this is specifically if you want to build that, resilience within yourself. And that is, if you're somebody who exercises, for instance, with weights, right? You can practice by lifting light weights first. So you do this all in one set. So one session, you lift light weights first, and then you lift heavy weights, and then you continue. So what you do is you're subconsciously programming your mind also now, and your body, to go through periods of light to heavy, to light to heavy. And then when you're doing this over a very prolonged period of time, your body's just used to, and your mind is just used to going through these ups and downs, which is exactly what resilience is. And you can also do the same with running. So they've actually found that high intensity workout is the most effective way to build resilience and is the most effective form of exercising, actually. And I know that's going to upset a lot of marathon runners, but again, I won't go into the research about it, but that is our innate way of exercising. Because if you think about our caveman times and really where we originated from, the way we never used to really exercise, we were forced to exercise because the way we used to live our lives is we used to run really fast from a danger, something coming to attack us, and then we would rest. And then we would run again fast, and then we would rest. So that is a specific technique to build resilience, is that high intensity workout of running a little bit and then resting. And then also diet. So really keeping, they say that the Mediterranean diet, I know it's not the Pakistani diet, but the Mediterranean diet is is the best diet for mental health. So but I think it can be adapted all over the world. So what that is, things like olive oil, fruits, grains, olives, things like that, and just staying away from a lot of processed food. And there's another one that I did share with you, Khazar, a few days ago, and that's this breathing technique which the Heart Math Institute have uncovered. And the Heart Math Institute is the biggest institute in the world for resilience. And it's a very simple but extremely effective breathing exercise that really compromises of just 2 actions or 3 actions. And number one, that's to, we do this for 3 minutes, by the way. All it takes is 3 minutes. And all you have to do is, in your mind, center your mind with something that you feel very grateful for. So that could be your children, that could be your home, that could be anything, right? And center your mind in that feeling, because that feeling makes you feel safe. And then again, just for 3 minutes, you breathe in for 5 seconds, and then you breathe out for 5 seconds. And then you continuously do this intentionally for 3 minutes. And essentially this one exercise it's like a reset button for the cortisol, which is the stress hormone in your body, to just literally reset and just flush it all out and bring you back down to homeostasis and really that peace feeling, or that contentment feeling, that safe feeling. Sorry, another long answer for a short question.
My next question is, I have a friend, and whenever I meet that friend, and I ask, how are you doing today? And she would say that I'm stressed. So I just want to understand how many kinds of stresses do we have, different types of stresses, and how can we manage stress in our life? And what are some practical techniques to reduce them?
Yeah, fantastic question. So I think this is a really important question as well. So there's 2 types of stress. We have eustress and then we have distress. And actually, it's something that I find similar to what you said, Khazar. A lot of people brand both of these stresses as just one awful stress, right? Which I'll get to in a moment in terms of this self-talk and the words that we use to describe our experiences. But essentially, eustress is a stress that we feel in the body and the mind, but it's a good amount of stress. And what it's doing is it's pumping our body with the right amount of cortisol to really stretch us to increase our capabilities and our potential in some ways. So the way that can show up is, maybe if you need to deliver for a project, or maybe if you have a wedding coming up and you're planning for it, or maybe if you're about to deliver a new, or not deliver, but you're going to have a new baby, or you're going to give a presentation or a public speaking. And in those times you can feel maybe a bit of stress, like, oh, this is a lot, it just feels stressful, right? But it's actually good stress because it's increasing our capacity and our potential and our skills, so to say, right? Because once you've done that thing, then you've now unlocked, oh, well, now I can do this, and I figured that out. And it adds to our good positive life experiences. but I'll get to that moment in a moment. And then distress is something that is very chronic. So this is long term. This is maybe a toxic relationship, toxic environment. This is trauma, like long term trauma, and it's something that really negatively affects us on a psychological level, but even on a physical level as well. It can really contribute to serious health conditions, and sometimes not so serious health conditions, but our overall health conditions, right? Because what happens is when we have too much cortisol in our body, it suppresses our immune system because other functions are being heightened to either fight, flight, or freeze. Now, getting back to this eustress, right? This good positive stress. Now, the thing to really keep in mind is that if we label these positive occurrences, stress, things that are good for us, bad, then we strip ourselves of this learning curve and this growing potential, so to say. So having a growth mindset and being informed about these things is really vital because our words and our thoughts and how we define things to ourselves and our others in our everyday conversations really shape our experiences and our mental well-being, so to say, on a certain level. And I won't go too much into this. There's a lot we're going to because it's just it's very layered. But research is actually now showing that our words, right, the words that we internally speak to ourselves and to our others, can in fact rewire our DNA. And that's very important because essentially it's very different levels, but our DNA controls to a certain extent our mindsets and our attitudes and things like that. So it's just very important to take note of the self-talk and the words that we use to describe our experiences in our own minds and also with others.
Yasmina, can you help me to understand a little bit about burnout at workplaces? So sometimes I also went through a burnout during the COVID. I was working from home and I didn't know what is burnout, what are the signs of a burnout. I just felt that I didn't want to do anything. Even I didn't want to and didn't like to read an article. I didn't want to attend a call work related. I didn't want to do anything. So can you just explain us what is burnout? What are some of the signs? And how can we manage burnout at workplaces and maybe at home also?
Yeah. So burnout is really characterized by just extreme exhaustion. It's getting to a point where it's just you sleep and your sleep doesn't make you feel more energized or awake. It's you sleep and you feel still heavily fatigued. You have a loss of pleasure doing things like you mentioned, Khazar, about the article. You have a loss of pleasure doing things that you would usually enjoy doing. And usually sometimes you kind of retract, you become a bit more introverted, you don't want to, socialize as much as usual and these types of things. And you would find that there's a mental decline again within, just how you wake up and present yourself to yourself and the world, like how you think about your days. Things just start to look a bit more doomy and gloomy, and you just really feel that you're depleted, so to say, like extremely fatigued. And again, but I think the main sign in that, and one that I always go by, and even when I'm having conversations, is when you sleep, do you feel rejuvenated or not? And is this going on for a long period of time? Because when we sleep, we should, to a certain extent, feel rejuvenated. So that's a big telltale sign. Okay, so in workplaces, I think again, right, I think we just need to drive home the importance of taking breaks or closing off for the day, especially when we're working from home and it's easy to continue to work. I think we need to have that discipline with ourselves and with our co-workers, and also, with our team members, or especially if you're an upper managerial position, with people that you manage, right, or you support. Because even at times when we feel like, no, I've still got a bit more left in my battery, I can still continue on. It's only when your battery is completely, like, have you ever had a dead battery in a car, right? It needs to be kick-started again. You don't want to get to that level. So if we incorporate healthy balances throughout and make this a very normalized thing, then hopefully shouldn't get to the point of burnout. So it's just being disciplined. I think that's the main thing.
Yasmin, I really love our conversation. The more we are talking, the more questions I want to ask. But I know you have a meeting, you have another appointment, and you are running late for that. So I'll make this question as last. So, if some people are struggling with mental health, what is one piece of advice for those people?
Okay, if you're struggling with mental health, and the first piece of advice I would say is, if you feel that there is somebody that you can speak to, please speak to them. Somebody who's supportive. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody you know. Sometimes this could be somebody in your community, a spiritual leader, somebody at your work, and please reach out and get that support. And that's probably the main piece of advice I would do. But if you, let's just say you don't have that support, right, then there's two things here, and one of those would be not harder to do, but sometimes when you're in that moment of, mental health, right, it can seem harder to do. But the two things is, number one, go easy on yourself, and you'll be mindful of the thoughts that you have on a day-to-day basis in terms of the judgment you give yourself, that self-critic force, like that self-critic voice. You have to really, at this moment, just really go easy on yourself and decrease the expectations you have of yourself. And if you can do that also from what others have of you, then we want to do that too. And then the second one is, again, like I said, sometimes this can be difficult, but I promise you it will make the world a difference. If in that moment you can start to really focus your attention less on usually the problem, because like I said before, mental health really stems from worrying too much of the future, worrying too much of the past. The only exception is if you have something toxic or very traumatic happening in your life right now. But if you can really focus on the things that you can feel grateful for, that is, once we can get in that energy of feeling, gratitude, like I said, it can be challenging sometimes. That can really be the difference between night and day. And please stay away from all things social media. That's probably the worst thing you can do when you're suffering with your mental health. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Yasmina.
Thank you so much, Kazar. That was amazing. Thank you for having me. And yeah, really enjoyed our talk as well. Could have went on for hours.